I love to puff herbs.
To the novice user, it might be easy to assume that weed edibles are pretty much limited to pop brownies and cookies. But the reality is way more. Brownies and cookies might be the classics, but there are actually many different types of edibles out there. Each different type of edible has its own characteristic and uses. Here to explain what Utah will have to offer in this realm of consumption is Julian Hensarling. So he's working with Boojum and creating edibles that are going to be available to Utah patients. Julian, one of my favorite aspects of going out of state is the selection of different products that you can find in recreational states, different potencies, different tastes, different feels. How is Utah's edible market going to be different than those?
Well, right now we have a very limited availability of what we can produce. It's sort of stuck with either lozenges or the gelatinous cubes. So what that does is that does limit the availability for the mode that you can consume. However, it really doesn't limit the flavors that can be available and the development that we can do with that. And, one of the things that I feel starting off small, especially with edibles and with food and things like that, is that it means we get to play around with stuff that a lot of the times has sort of been like pushed to the side. You go to a lot of places and there are vast amounts of gummies and lozenges and things of like in the confectionery world, but the flavors, I feel like they stop because they're said, you know what, we're allowed to make candy that has medicine in it. And that's as far as you need to go. When you have a limited market, we're now sitting here saying, okay, we have these parameters. Now let's get us creative and focus in on what we're, let's do something new. Let's create something that's specific to this market that we have here. And that's really what I've been trying to do with Boojum, is saying, okay, we have a certain number of, we have these parameters. Where can we make this different? And one of the things that I've been working with a lot of is saying, okay, we have, this is something that comes from, we're using THC or a plant that's in there. And these things have flavors, they're terpenes, like all that stuff can be developed and is, can be delicious. And so I've really been spending a lot of time on like, what's a new flavor? What's something that's not going to be just, this is a watermelon piece of candy. That doesn't really interest me. And I feel like this market is going to, they're going to want a good product. And if they taste it and they say, that's an interesting flavor, I can, that's playing off of the medicine that's in here. That's something new to me. I think that that's going to be very exciting for this market because we're going to be able to educate people slowly and open people's horizons into flavors and things like that. So that, in the eventuality that we can produce more foods, I think that we're going to have a very nuanced and educated, group of people who are purchasing this stuff. And I hope that we can sort of all cultivate that with the consumers here.
And that's something that we're learning every day at Salt Lake City and here in the green scene, is that it's not all about THC when you're purchasing products at the local pharmacies. What should I look for when I'm purchasing edibles in the Utah market?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I have noticed is that people are producing candies as fast as possible, in lozenges, in these gelatinous cubes, and they're not spending as much time developing a recipe. That's something that I think the consumer really should be aware of, is how many ingredients are going into each of these products. Because while there's a limited number of things medicinally that you can add in there, there are vast amounts of ingredients that can be put into foods like this to make them last longer, to make the flavor stronger. But in a lot of cases, it's, to make it easier to produce. And it's something that's easier to make a lot of the times, without any concern for why am I choosing to use sugar versus, sucrose or glucose. I mean, there are so many little elements that go into the production of these things that people can, you might grab a bag of something, take it, and then realize, oh, what's this weird flavor? What is, why does this make me feel, my stomach not feel well? You look at those ingredients, it could have 4 or 5 different forms of sweetener in there. All of them could be artificial. The flavoring, there's this vast amount of artificial flavoring that's allowed to be put into this stuff. And a lot of that's disregarding, natural flavors, or, you can produce candies using different kinds of sugars or stuff like that because it's maybe easier to do. You don't have to spend as much time with each batch. And I think that that's really not only a lost opportunity, but it's sort of taking away from what people are going to a pharmacy in the first place for. I mean, they're going there because they want something that, sure, there's sugar in these things. That's why it tastes good, or that's something that helps with the absorption in it. But it doesn't have to be a complicated recipe. It should be something that's, what everything is that's in there, and it should be something that makes sense for like why an ingredient is in a product. And so I think really and truly, like, having consumers be able to say, I know what's in here, and I know how this, I know that this is going to do to me because I've done this, I've had these flavors before, or there's nothing in there that's scaring me. And so I think people should really be aware of that, because there's a lot of stuff you can throw into these products that have no reason to be there in the first place.
Right. And you've got a lot of different Utah laws that you have to abide by that other states don't when making these edibles. And, what I got from what you were just saying is we're not just making cough drops that taste like cherry, strawberry, watermelon that have the correct dosage in it. The shapes of these gummies can't resemble candy that kids would want. How is this affecting, your design? And do you see any changes in the law coming in the future?
I mean, I can't speak too much to the changes in the law. I can see some really like blatantly open possibilities that I think that just haven't probably been discussed when it comes to like what should be available.
This is an uncharted territory for Utah, exactly. Right?
And I really think that, the more that people see that, there's only 2 options that are available to people right now. And I think that that's limiting a lot of opportunities for, medicine to be able to be introduced into someone's, into their diet, into their day. So I think that we're going to see more and more develop there just by the simple fact that the market's going to speak back to this. They're going to start to see that, well, if we're allowing sugar with THC and a flavoring, well, there's lots of different ways that those few ingredients can be produced and not resemble candy, nothing that's going to look like something a kid would want, but might be more enjoyable for the consumer. The way I really approached this was an opportunity to use these constraints almost to our benefit, because it means you can't go too crazy with what you have. So you have to focus in on, you have, your product, the THC, the plant, the cannabis that's going into there has flavors. They're in there in the first place.
Well, that's my question, I guess, is, instead of using cherry, watermelon, strawberry, I want to taste some of the terpenes that are found
exactly
in the grains. And I think you're hitting on a really important note is the flavors. They're already there. It seems like we're taking them out and replacing them with artificial stuff.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I understand sort of the reasoning behind that, but I think that it's a lost opportunity, because if we're now everyone's allowed to start to learn about these things. Not many people think about the fact that cannabis has flavor. I mean, that it's a plant that each plant has different flavors. They have their terpenes. Like, one of the things that I've really been working with is, so we are right now using orange Skittles as the cannabis plant. And so it says orange in there for a reason. The citral that's in there is something that shows up in the first place. So I've actually been using citral in the production, like as I'm developing our recipes. So adding orange, natural orange flavoring, but then also adding citral a bit more in there. And what that does is it actually enhances the flavors that already are in the cannabis. And so when you taste it, it doesn't taste just like orange. It doesn't taste like you're just eating a raw, vegetal flavor from the cannabis. But you can taste that there's an herbal undertone that, it's not medicinal, but there's something different there. There's like a nuanced flavor that I think is kind of fun. I mean, I think that they're delicious. And I also think that it tastes like something that is from cannabis. I mean, you're not being lied to with the fact that like, this is something, we just shoved like a secret ingredient that's going to do something to you. This is natural. This is a natural thing. And so taste it, learn about it.
Well, it's cool that you brought up the strain specifically that you're working with, the Z Skittles.
Yeah.
From trike, I assume, right? Because it seems like Boojum, you guys are working with primarily trike flower right now. What I've seen in out-of-state markets that excites me is some edibles that are strain specific.
Absolutely. And I think that's important. I really do.
And because there's something into it, because there's strains that work for certain patients the way they want them to work, right? And so why not get that in edible form? I don't want to get just, I don't want to say generic, but just a concentrated form of the cannabinoids that are coming in there. It'd be great to know that it is coming from Blue Dream, Sour Diesel, White Widow, so on and so forth. Getting into the scientific talk of stuff, what qualifies you to make edibles for Utah medical cannabis patients? Not to put you on the spot, but I assume that you have more than a pressure cooker on your resume.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been developing recipes for years, whether it's food products that are sold over, like at a restaurant. I've developed, I've worked with coffee companies to develop, like to work with what they can do with their products.
That excites me.
Like one of the things that I've worked with there is like, a company that was starting sort of a power bar, like a, energy bar thing, and wanting to use not just the caffeine that's in coffee, but the other elements that are in there to be able to give you energy. And that's something that I'm starting, I was starting to see a lot of with recipe development and, even like restaurant, menus and things like that, is starting to figure out, okay, well, there's one thing that we know exists in this product, but there's 5 other things that do, stuff as well.
Right.
And so let's not forget that there's the main ingredient or the main, like chemical compound that does something.
Right.
But let's think about this in a more holistic way, that we can take all of these elements and develop them on their own.
Because that's what it's all about, the holistic healing approach, right?
Exactly.
Do yourself, but he healthy doing it.
For sure. With coffee, it's like we've used roasted beans trying to get the caffeine and extracting stuff. And we forgot that it was a cherry. It was a plant before that. The green bean, when it's fermented, creates stuff. And so, it's like what's in that compound before. And so learning to take that stuff. And it's going to be the same thing with THC or, with cannabis, is that you can say there's this one thing that's, like that exists, but there's so many other elements to it. Let's pick those things and start to learn and develop that stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I think that it sort of fits in with what's happening in the greater scheme of food in the world.
No, you're onto something, I think. And one question that I think of when I think of edibles is you have the infused edibles and then you have the ones that are sprayed, right? What are you guys doing at Boojum?
They're infused.
Infused?
Absolutely. Yep.
And just for our audience that's not familiar, what goes into the process of infusing to make sure that every bite has the same dose, I guess?
Sure. I mean, we're working in small batch, like honestly, and I hope that even as we scale up, that we can maintain working as a small batch. And the way that, when you do that, you have control over what we're producing. So when you add the cannabis product into this candy, I am the one who is sitting there mixing that stuff up and, maintaining the fact that everything is integrated the way that it should be. I mean, the beauty of working with sugar is that it's an easy thing to put the flavors and anything into it just by its nature. When you produce it and you have the sugars at a certain temperature and you add stuff in there and it bubbles up, I mean, it's doing a lot of the work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that and this kind of goes back to the conversation of the things that you need to avoid, is stuff that's being sent off to like a factory that's focusing on just producing as much as possible. There's not, people aren't watching and specifically maintaining each batch. way we're producing stuff now is each batch is started and finished with eyes on it and hands involved. And I think that that's a very important part to being able to maintain that dosage and to be able to sort of maintain a level of quality, because this is not just candy, it's medicine. And that's going to require, like, I think a bit more, focus and a bit more attention. So that's something that we're really trying to foster within with our company.
No, and that's good to hear, because it is a medicine, right? What products have you produced that have been on shelves in the pharmacies as to date? I know that's been a big complaint with Utah patients, is just the lack of products around all, on the whole 9 yards. But we have a new program that's just being developed. We did have some of the gummies come out. What have you guys produced at Boojum so far?
So far, we are just about to roll out our first line of lozenges. Those will be, I'm not specifically sure when they'll be in stores. It'll be the next few weeks in the pharmacies. Starting with those, and then we'll switch over to the gelatinous cubes, the gummies.
Right.
There's going to be 2 flavors at this point, because again, like, the flavors that we're using have to recognize and represent the medicine, the cannabis that's going into it. So the first one is going to be the orange Skittles, orange, working with that citral. And so the gummies will do something as well. We're still trying to figure out what's the right strain, what's the right flavor profile for that. So, at this point right now, we'll have one thing of lozenges, and then we'll have the gummies hopefully rolling out just after that. And then after that, we sort of have to sit and figure out where we can expand those. There's going to be, the more plants, the more that, strains that we can start to work with, the more we can develop with that. And then we just wait and see what's the next opportunity that's available through the state. Right.
Yeah. A lot of Utah patients associate edibles with food, drinks, tinctures, dissolvable powders. When I heard you talking about coffee, that really excites me when I go out of state and I can get an infused iced coffee, or even the dissolvable powders that I can add to whatever. What do you envision for Utah's future when it comes to the types of edibles? I know you're limited right now, which is kind of a shame. It's kind of like probably being in a kitchen with only a certain amount of tools. You got the eggs, but you can't beat the eggs.
For sure.
You crack them right now. And what excites you about the future, I guess?
Well, I hope that we can start to recognize that, not only, so we have cannabis, there's things that we can produce, but Utah also grows and produces a lot of food. This, especially like the warmer the climate that's going to be happening, like there's more opportunities to be able to produce foods that are Utah, like using local produce. There's a lot of stuff that I think that we can start to play with, whether it's, things that have oil in them, using things that have any of the fruits that are able to be grown around here. There's so many options to create, drinks, shots of like juice, stuff like that have these things. I've always found that being able to infuse really good oils and things like that, salad dressings, but just like finishing oils for things, the way that you can manage your dosing with that element is something that I would be amazed if it doesn't happen here soon, because it is one of those things that if you don't want to not everyone wants candy. Like, no, people don't want sugar all the time. There's just much interest in savory, and we should not forget that. Like there's brownies, there's cookies, there's all of that stuff that can happen, but there's also the savory side of this. And also, cannabis is perfect for that. You think about how close to, a herb that it is, and sort of thinking about it in more that realm. And so I hope that we, as in Utah, can start to recognize that it's not just sugar, and there should be the savory side, and what does that allow? What's the possibility with that?
Well, and we know some patients, personally here at Salt Lake City that are diabetics.
Absolutely.
That can't have sugar at all.
Sure.
Through the patient profiles that we've done, One of our favorite patients up in Ogden, Nicole McGarry, she suffers from a lot of different ailments. One in particular is her stomach, and I can't think of all the scientific names with it out in front of me right now. But she still has to go out of state for some of the products that she needs. Ironically, the gelatinous cubes work perfect for her because they can dissolve in her stomach the way that they need to be absorbed by the body.
Sure.
But there's been a lack of those products, so it's still going out of state. Can you, going into the pharmacies, being familiar with the pharmacy owners, can you anticipate that's going to flip here soon where products will be more readily available so patients do have to stop traveling out of state?
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, my hope is that this will develop more in the state. I hope that it develops in a way that everyone, no one's rushing into producing a product that isn't, thoughtful. Like, that being said, it's only a matter of time before more people are going to be producing this, the more that they learn how to do this.
Yep.
I think that with Boojum, we're in a solid place because we're producing the medicine that goes into these products in very interesting ways and very healthy ways. It's like being able to develop that, like, how do we start to integrate the like the rosins, the things that are never having to come across, any elements other than water to create the medicine in the first place. Starting to integrate that stuff, starting to learn about how like, what's the right way to add the medicine, when to add it, what temperatures. These are all things that I think people are going to start to learn, and they're going to start to do it. And, there's going to be a little bit of competition, which is good because we're all going to be creating better and better products. So I think, sky's the limit with that stuff. And I think that soon people are not going to have to leave the state to purchase products like that. And I hope that we can, as a state, start to create more, opportunity to develop the foods that people are still going out of state for or are, missing. There's so many people who are moving here from places like California or other, especially after like the coronavirus. That's the whole reason we're here is that, major cities in these places are, they got hit hard. And so a lot of people said, hey, I'll go to a place like Utah, mountains, space. I miss things. They're going to either be going back to where they were to purchase these things, or they're going to be missing it and wishing that they could have that. So I think that the more that we can work towards that would be great. But that being said, the products that are soon to be, that are going to be available, the lozenges, the gummies, things like that, are going to be getting better and better here and are going to be done in a way that I think, people should, I think they should appreciate the fact that the stuff here is going to be just as good. I really believe that.
You're spot on. And we've already had a lot of evidence to bring truth to that statement between the products, the flour that has been available to Utah patients in just a short amount of time. A lot of people have to realize that we're still under 150 days in our new program. And, we're buying cannabis in Utah. You can't buy happiness, but you can buy cannabis in Utah. And that's pretty close to me.
For sure.
So we're moving in the right direction. And it's also exciting to know that we've got people like you that are help growing this program from within and kind of see the big picture. Because one thing that I think a lot of people aren't talking about is a lot like Paul Revere, rec is coming. Rec is coming. And to put something in perspective, as if us voters in Utah voted against Prop 2 4 years ago in 2016. I hate to break it to a lot of residents in Utah, but the country's going to go rec whether or not Utah wants it to or not.
Sure.
So that we're actually in the position to educate the 65% of the population that is unfamiliar with cannabis, that is probably a little unwary of it coming to our state. We get to educate them, and people like you showing that we're taking a healthy approach. Nothing against Brownie Mary in California. She was doing great things, but it's obviously archaic compared to where we are now.
Sure.
And, myself as a consumer, I've been consuming since high school. I can tell you with complete honesty that it's been 100% for medication purposes.
Mhm.
The older I get, the more and more I like edibles, the more I enjoy edibles. And it makes me kind of curious how somebody that's in the industry, how do you prefer to consume? What's your preferred method?
I mean, I would say, and this may represent my generation, or sort of the generation that I was raised around, but flower is still to me the core of it. I
Yep.
mean, I I truly do love the history of what marijuana, like of what cannabis came from and
Right.
what it exists as. I mean, whether it was for religious purposes or for health purposes or for all of that stuff, I find that like the very core of the plant and the experience of partaking in it in the way in what you can or allowed to do is great. That being said, the older I get and the more that I'm learning about you know dosage is becoming more and more important. I feel
Big
like
time.
um,
Yeah.
you know, because it's it's not something that this is something that you can use throughout the day for various reasons, for various elements, and it's not something that you want it to be. I mean, you can have it be something that takes like that's up here, but there's so many, like it's all that space that's in between down to the bottom that is interesting to me now, and being able to use it for the specific medicinal stuff, and being able to have one lozenge and saying, okay, that was enough,
Yep.
like that did it. And the way that you consume it, it soaks in. You sort of have control over what's happening. I think that that's very interesting to be able to sort of play around with that middle ground, and because that's where I start to see it as real medicine. I mean, as like then we start to talk about it, being able to remove a lot of the pharmaceuticals that any of people who have you don't need certain things like for anxiety and all of this stuff. You have the opportunity now to take something that the dosage is, exactly how much it's going to be every time, how it affects you. That consistency and that ability to control your experience, I find very interesting. And I think that the older all of us get, and the more we're looking to remove certain things from our, like whether it's like from our medicine, things that we have to take, and replace it with cannabis.
Well, I can bring up Willie Nelson for a perfect example. He, like you and I, are flower
Yeah.
consumers, and that's the cornerstone of where I've came from. And
Mhm.
it's hard for me to pass up a juicy nug for anything else,
For sure.
because I know it. I know it. It's it's kind of a habit, the consuming process. But I'm not going to be young forever. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be able to smoke and put hot vapors into my lungs forever, right? So I don't want to be Willie Nelson. I still want to be 80 and be like, I'm going to have that yearly doobie,
Yep.
and still be able to have the option. Um, you know, I guess that's another thing is with the dosing as well, though, is not to dog on Brownie Mary again. When I get some of your gelatinous cubes from the pharmacy, I know exactly how many milligrams of THC and what other cannabinoids are in there. I hate to break it to Brownie Mary, but half of her pan was probably a little bit hotter than the other half.
For sure.
And I think, and I guess this leads into, is my first experience with edibles was as a senior in high school, and I ate a brownie. The guy who gave it told me only to eat half, but
Mhm.
I didn't take his word for it. I ate the whole thing, and it didn't kick in like it was supposed to. So what did I do? I ate another brownie,
Yeah.
and it was way too much. Way
Sure.
too much. I couldn't even walk right, and I don't want that to happen to new Utah patients that are unfamiliar, because that experience might not lead to more consumption and better health, in other words. What do you recommend for people dosing themselves for the first time?
I mean, I think you always start with less. I mean, you're going to start with one.
Right.
This is, even though like I think hopefully eventually we're able to have stronger and weaker versions of like specific lozenges, like or the gelatinous cubes,
Yeah.
so that someone who knows what works for them,
Right.
they can then stick with one thing rather than having to eat multiple. This always takes me back. There was that article Maureen O'Dowd from the New York Times wrote where she'd never experienced cannabis in her whole life,
Yeah.
and went to Colorado to figure, learn about it. And she did something like you said. She had a chocolate, and the chocolate was very good. It tasted like chocolate. She ate half of it or something like that, and was like, I don't feel anything. So she ate the whole thing, and then because it was all consumed, everything was metabolized in her stomach and her intestines, it hit at this very specific point. And it ruined her experience. I mean, the whole article that she wrote was basically saying, this is terrifying, we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
When a lot of people wrote back and were like, it's because you overdid it and you didn't teach your body or like you jumped into the deep end really fast without any, thought through this. One of the things with the lozenges and like with the, gelatinous cubes that is nice is that a lot of it is something that you can have that will sublingual. I mean, this is something that dissolves in your mouth and you're absorbing it in that way. I think that's faster acting so that you're not sitting around, oh, I don't feel it, maybe I need to do more. So this gives you the opportunity to get the medicine, a bit faster. It's not as fast as certain things, but it's certainly faster than a lot of the other, like within the food world.
It's like the Boojum oral spray that you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
That's really exciting for me because that's instantaneous. You're not
Exactly.
waiting for an edible. Sometimes even a tincture takes a little bit of time, and unless you hold it under your tongue for that right amount of time, it's going to turn into an edible and take that 30, 45-minute trip down your intestine.
Exactly.
Well, and I guess that I don't want to get redundant on the lozenges, but what other products maybe are you guys thinking of right now that you're not able to put out?
I mean, after those two, I have a lot of experience with chocolate. And
Yeah.
I think that, we were talking about coffee. Chocolate is a very similar thing in the sense that we're talking about a product, it's fermented, there's the benefits there already. It's a raw product,
Mm-hmm.
the way that if you prepare it correctly. I think that and also there is amazing chocolate being produced in Utah. And there's a lot of people doing amazing things with that stuff. To be able to combine those two and to create stuff that's, that's chocolate that plays up and works the same way that I'm sort of looking at the lozenges and the gelatinous cubes of being able to say, hey, we're bringing a plant into this that has, its flavors. Well, cacao from Costa Rica and cacao from Brazil or all these places, they taste different. Thinking about, well, if we can find single origin cacao that has a flavor profile that works really well with a specific strain, that's super exciting to me because again, it's like we're taking, one ingredient and figuring out, well, what is it specifically about these two things that works together?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that's interesting with each one of them and sort of combining those two. So I really hope that that's something that's on the horizon.
That's exciting. For the first time user using edibles, would you recommend maybe using edibles first rather than maybe a cartridge or maybe trying flower first? I know kind of a loaded question and it's hard to put yourself back into that position of being first time user, but maybe use your imagination. Today, your first day of consuming cannabis as a Utah patient, which route would you take?
I mean, I think that the idea of lozenges, taking small, like starting there, I think honestly is going to be, for anyone who's concerned with any lung health whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
You're already removing any of those concerns when you're consuming this, like when you're taking it as, as an edible.
Yep.
I think that the managing of your dose is very easy with, like, especially the way that the state of Utah is, allowing these things to be produced. It's a thing. It's like, this is one little piece right here. You consume that, you sit, you give the time that's available. And I'm at, whether it's one or two that, you take one after the other or something like that, you're going to experience it. And I think it's going to be a very easy way for you to experience it because I know if I was to speak from personal experience, those first couple times that you try to consume something whether vapor, like through vapors and stuff like that, it's not that easy. I mean, if you're not if you didn't smoke cigarettes or anything like this, the first time that you're taking something into your lungs and hoping that that does what you want it to do, that can seem daunting. And I think a lot of time people put it in their mouth, blow it out. You know, either they're not sure how much they actually got. It could be something that says, okay, if you take one hit off of this should be this amount. Right. But how much did you actually take into your lungs? What was it?
Should be is the key statement there, right? And I've seen a lot of people consume for the first time, and probably 90% of the time they don't inhale, they don't actually consume it. And so you hear these stories all the time. I didn't get high my first time I consumed because you didn't really consume. That's why I think the edibles is probably the safest route to go, because you brought up a good point. Not everybody is a smoker. Not everybody has smoked before.
Yeah.
I can't smoke a cigarette to save my life, you know, but I can smoke a doobie all day long. But you hit on another keynote that Utahns have a healthy lifestyle. Absolutely. From all the states I've lived in, it's amazing how healthy people are here, and the amount of athletes that we have that might prefer eating one of your edibles before they hit the hills skiing that day or take a hike, a bike ride. Again, they know what amount they're taking and they're dosing, but two, they're not harming their body in any other ways. And
for sure, we have so many athletes that, you know, when it comes to recovery, I mean, there are places, you know, Colorado, I think it's something that's being developed, like, you know, certain places that, you know, you go on a really hard bike ride, or you were skiing all day long and your body is aching and stuff like that. You know, you have the opportunity to make the decision. You could take, you know, a gelatinous cube, a lozenge with THC in it, or you could take pain meds that are going to, you know, have way more issues there. Yeah. And so I think that, you know, these lozenges and things like that are great for those situations where you're looking to basically, you know, you're replacing certain parts of your, you know, like a way that you're medicating yourself to manage pain. You know, all of these things are stuff that, you know, cannabis is known to be able to help with. It's natural, and it's something that is very easy to control. And hopefully it's something that, you know, you have to take, you know, less of something. You know, you don't take the pile of, like, you know, ibuprofen or stuff like that. Right. You can limit it down to this sort of thing. And I think that that's a more sustainable element for an athlete, because, you know, they're not having to deal with all the adverse effects that a lot of these pain meds actually bring about. And, you know, it's funny, you know, I think about like, you know, acetaminophen or ibuprofen or things like that, where it's been around forever and we're still learning about not the goods, but the bads that stuff has. And I feel that cannabis is actually the flip side, especially when it comes to orally consuming it. We're learning about the benefits, the good things there. And so I feel like that's an advertisement enough to be able to say, you know, this might be something that's great for people who are extremely active, are really, you know, are professional athletes even, that we can start to make a transition from, you know, like the completely artificial to the natural. Right. And you know, how many athletes that I know that their diets were the big change when it came to their, you know, their competitiveness. Yeah. You know, they go vegan, or they decide to really start to focus in on their diet. This is just another element, I think, in that, you know, that path. Right.
Well, Julian, I can't thank you enough for, you know, taking the time to educate me and Utah patients more about the edibles that are going to be available here in the pharmacies. I know we have a new pharmacy opening this Friday, Wholesome Co-op in Bountiful. And I know not only a whole array of Boojum and Mother Liquor products should be available up there, which is exciting. So to let our green scene know where they can find those available. I know Dragonfly Wellness, they carry some of your products as well. But I thought, within talking with you, we need to get on again here in the near future and maybe talk about some home remedies, some home recipes that our green scene can maybe do on their own. Absolutely. To bridge that gap between some of the edibles that maybe we don't have available to us. Again, making our own tinctures at home, maybe some fun recipes for the salad dressings and
Absolutely.
the entrees that we're having for Sunday dinner. That's really fun to know that we get to incorporate. And a lot of people assume this is for the party lifestyle, but really for me, how I look at it is a healthier way to live. And if I can incorporate this into how I prepare my meals at home and control more of not only the THC that I'm ingesting, but the other food that's helped fueling my life, that's right on board to what I'd like to do. So thank you again, Julian, and enjoy the
Great
rest
talking.
of your day, my man.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Sorry, we just always have a little pause there, but that went well, Julian. I appreciate you. We're probably going to shoot this interview out tomorrow.
Okay.
Out there, we're just going to edit, put our intro and exit and the music in there.
Awesome.
Just so I've got it, I got your name. You're the confectioner at Boojum Group, right?
Yeah, that works great.
And am I spelling this
You
right?
could throw in recipe development because, like we were saying, in the sort of like the other thing that I'm bringing to their program is I've worked with so many different flavors and so many things, like being able to create recipes for other products, or like you were just saying, being able to think about ways we can use the products that we're producing otherwise, like to be, to expand, the horizons there. That's really what I hope, I can offer.
You've got a set of rules and regulations that the state put in front of you, but I'm sure you've already started thinking of the loopholes and different routes you can take that maybe because unfortunate for us, the people that, unfortunate and fortunate, the people that set these laws and regulations into place aren't regular cannabis users.
True.
So a lot of stuff is just ass backwards when you read it. And, we've ironed some of these problems out. But it's, I don't know, ever further, I guess we're getting close.
It's true. One of the biggest things I think about is like, if I was, within the state and I, had no idea or understanding of cannabis, you're going to look to the most obvious places around. You're going to say, okay, well, what are they doing? And what is the things that I can recognize?
Uh-huh.
And I hope that fear of, well, what could we do that's specific here in Utah? I hope that can happen, because the more that we can learn that Utah doesn't have to follow everybody else, Utah could be its own thing. I mean, this is Utah's kind of a weird place to begin with, it kind of marching to its own, its own drum.
It really is.
Why can't we sort of take that when it comes to cannabis? I hope, and I think that'll happen, but,
I think it is. And there's reasons why people like you have come into town. We have Richard Maloney up at Wholesome Co., who has a background at Leafly up at Seattle. And there's people that have been in the industry that are kind of flocking to Utah because they see this untapped region that's named Zion for a reason, right? Sure. So one, this belt on I-15 is ideal for growing hemp. So I see us really leading the industry route as well as the medical route as well.
For sure.
We're leaning on medical cannabis here in Utah, and personally, I think we had to for our population to accept it from the get-go. Yeah. But again, it's almost like Pandora's box. I hate putting that negative, spin on it, but we've opened the door and it's allowed us to actually move in the direction that we need to. And 5 years from now, it's going to be a cool place to be, I think.
I agree.
Cannabis culture will be alive here in Utah. And that's what we're trying to do at Salt Lake City, is bridge the gap, not so that we are California cannabis culture and community. It's just that we can adapt some of the stuff that works, but it allows us to start moving in our own direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, all right, Julian. Well, I appreciate you, man. I'll send you guys cuts of all this stuff to Dash and Olivia so you guys can use on your end as well.
Awesome.
But keep us in mind, too. Never hesitate to let me know of anything new you guys have coming out. We'd love to spout it out to our audience.
Totally. And let me know about the restaurant and everything that's up in Ogden.
Oh, yes. So I got to talk to Amy this week. But It's good to know that you're interested in talking to her. I might just pass the buck on that. And she's a really cool lady. Her roots are set in Ogden. They have, I think, 4 restaurants, 3 in Salt Lake Valley, and then 1 up in Ogden, and then the WB Eatery, which is a wine, coffee bistro. But really the idea of it came about after visiting Amsterdam. And so they want to set it up with CBD, incorporating that into the recipes that they have to offer.
Sure.
But when rec comes, it might be an easy switch over for them where we have these cool
I mean,
cafes.
I gotta say, like the THC cannabis and stuff like that, flavor-wise, is so much better, and there's so much more there than the CBD thing. So I really, that's where it gets very exciting.
And I think we're attracted to certain strains that we consume and smoke because of the flavonoids that are present in them. It's just in our human nature to be attracted to what we need. No scientific evidence on my fact to base that, but there's a reason I'm attracted to certain strains, the fruitier ones or even some of the cheesier ones. But I think that's how our food is too, and where our flavors come from and why we're attracted to certain things. So why not have it taste just like what we're attracted to? Maybe like the wine district in Apple Hill in Sacramento, they're starting to do their sour diesel strain specific wines and stuff like that. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think that is the optimal direction for this, is to not forget what it is and to, say, hey.
I love to puff.